The Lonely Encounter. The night was cold, and the wind howled across the empty ruins of the outpost. The human sat alone near a small fire, his armor dented, his eyes tired, and his heart heavy. He had survived battles, storms, and hunger, but loneliness was something he could never escape. The silence pressed on him like a heavy weight, and every crack in the walls sounded like a whisper from the ghosts of the past. He looked around the broken metal walls of the outpost, wondering if this place would be his grave. For months he had seen no one who was not an enemy, no one who spoke kindly, no one who cared if he lived or died. He chewed on a dry piece of ration bread, staring at the fire, his mind filled with memories of Earth, of his own mother, of a childhood that felt like another lifetime. Then he heard it, a soft voice trembling, carried by the wind. "I lost my mother today. Please, I'm afraid, let me stay." The human froze, every muscle tense, his hand moving toward his weapon. He had learned long ago that in this war-torn world, nothing was ever as it seemed. Voices could be traps, shadows could be assassins, and kindness often ended in betrayal. Still, the voice was small, fragile, and filled with pain. It was not the voice of a soldier or a spy, but of a child. Slowly, carefully, he rose from the fire, his boots crunching on the dusty floor. His eyes searched the doorway of the outpost where the shadows flickered with the firelight. And there she was, a small alien girl, her skin pale with strange markings that glowed faintly in the dark. Her eyes wide, full of tears, and her tiny hands clutching the torn fabric of her clothes. She looked no older than 10 in human years, yet her gaze carried the sorrow of someone who had seen too much. The human's breath caught in his throat. He had fought against her kind before, seen them on the battlefield, feared them, hated them. But this child was different. She was trembling, her voice broken, her body thin as if she had not eaten for days. She looked at him with desperation, not hatred. Her lips shook as she repeated, "Please, let me stay. I have nowhere else." For a long moment the human did not move. Memories of war screamed in his mind, warning him to push her away, to protect himself, to survive alone. But another memory rose too, the memory of his own mother's, hand holding his when he was a child, the warmth of a voice telling him he was safe, the promise that he was never alone. His heart, hardened by years of battle, softened just enough to let that memory guide him. He lowered his weapon. "You can stay," he said quietly. The girl blinked, her tears falling freely now. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to her knees, clutching her chest as if relief itself was too heavy to bear. The human stepped forward and caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was cold, trembling, her pulse weak. She was not lying. She was truly starving, truly afraid. He carried her back to the fire, placing her gently on a blanket. She curled up like a frightened animal, her eyes never leaving his face. He broke a piece of his ration bread and offered it to her. She hesitated, then took it with both hands, eating quickly but with silent tears. Every bite seemed to hurt her as much as it saved her, for it reminded her of her mother who could no longer share it with her. The human watched in silence, his chest tight with emotions he had buried long ago. This was no enemy soldier, no threat, no trick. This was a child who had lost everything. And in that moment, he realized that perhaps he had lost everything. Too, they were both alone, both broken, both survivors of a cruel universe. When the girl finally spoke again, her voice was small, barely above a whisper. "My mother told me, humans are dangerous, but kind too. She said one day I would know the difference today. She died protecting me." The human looked into her glowing eyes, and for the first time in many years he felt something stir inside him. Not just pity, not just duty, but a sense of belonging, a reminder that life could still hold meaning. He leaned closer to the fire, his voice low, his words heavy with unspoken promise. "You can stay forever," he said. And with those words, the walls of loneliness cracked. The night outside was still cold. The war still raged and danger still lurked. But inside the broken outpost, for the first time in years, A spark of family was born. Trust and fear. The fire burned low as the night stretched on. The human sat with his back against the cold wall, watching the alien child sleep beside the flames. Her breathing was shallow, her small body curled tight, as if even in dreams she feared the world around her. Every so often she would twitch or whimper, whispering words in a language he did not know. It was the sound of someone who had lived with fear for too long. He should have rested, but his mind refused to settle. His hand rested near his weapon, his instincts sharp. He had told her she could stay forever, but now he wondered what that really meant. Could he truly protect her, feed her, keep her alive, when he himself barely had enough strength to go on? And worse, what if she was not as helpless as she seemed? What if her tears were real, but her presence was still a trap? The human sighed and rubbed his face with tired hands. War had taught him to doubt everything. It had also taught him that trust was the most dangerous weapon of all. Yet, when he looked at her small form by the fire, his chest ached in a way he could not explain. It was the ache of memories he tried to bury. Memories of his own little sister back on Earth. Her laughter, her fear of the dark, her hand gripping his when thunder shook their house. A sudden sound outside broke his thoughts. The crunch of gravel, the faint scrape of metal against stone. His heart raced and he quickly doused the fire, plunging the room into darkness. The girl stirred, her glowing eyes snapping open, wide with alarm. He held a finger to his lips, silently warning her to stay quiet. The noise grew louder, footsteps moving closer, slow and searching. The human pressed his back against the wall, listening carefully. It was not the sound of wild beasts, nor the wind. These were soldiers, or hunters. Perhaps they were tracking him. Or perhaps they were after the child. Either way, discovery meant death. The girl clutched the edge of his torn jacket, her body trembling. Her voice shook as she whispered, "They are looking for me." The human's breath caught, his suspicions confirmed. So it was true, she carried some secret, something worth chasing. Something dangerous. He wanted to ask her why, to demand answers, but there was no time. He motioned for her to stay silent and crouched low, drawing his weapon. The footsteps reached the outer wall, pausing. Shadows flickered in the cracks of the doorway, and he could hear hushed voices speaking in a strange tongue. One voice was rough, commanding, the other softer, nervous. They were deciding whether to enter. The girl gripped his arm tightly, her whisper urgent. "Please, don't. Let them take me if they find me. They will kill me or worse." Her words cut deep. For years he had fought against her kind without mercy, yet now he found himself standing between her and danger. He did not know why. Perhaps it was the memory of her tears, or the desperate way she looked at him. Perhaps it was the promise he had spoken without thinking. "You can stay forever." Either way, he knew he could not hand her over. The soldiers lingered outside. Then after tense moments, their footsteps moved away into the night. The human waited, heart pounding, until silence returned. Only then did he allow himself to breathe again. He relit the fire, its light spilling across the child's frightened face. "You told me the truth," he said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "They are after you." She nodded, her small hands clutching the blanket, her voice trembling. "My mother was hiding me from them. She gave her life so I could run. She told me to find someone who could protect me, someone kind, and now I found you." The human stared at her, torn between anger and sorrow. He wanted to ask her why she was so important, why soldiers hunted a child, but when he opened his mouth, the words refused to come. Instead, he only asked, "Why me? Why trust me?" The girl looked into his eyes, and her answer was simple. "Because you didn't turn me away. You fed me. You gave me warmth. No one else has done that since my mother died." Her words pierced through his walls, and for the first time in years, he felt something like trust slowly creeping back into his heart. But with trust came fear, a fear greater than any battle he had faced, because now he knew that protecting her meant more than fighting soldiers. It meant fighting his own doubt, his own loneliness, and his own broken heart. The fire crackled softly between them. The human leaned back, staring at the ceiling of the ruined outpost, his voice low almost to himself. If I protect you, I will become a target too. The girl nodded slowly, whispering, Then we are both targets already. Her honesty left him silent. In that moment, he realized the truth. He had already chosen her side. He had already decided that she would not face this universe alone. And though trust was dangerous, and fear burned in his chest, something deeper began to take root. Something that whispered maybe, just maybe, this bond was worth the risk. The night outside was still dark, but inside the firelight, a fragile thread of trust was woven. And though both feared what tomorrow would bring, they knew they would face it together. Secrets in the dark. The night dragged on slowly, and though the fire gave warmth, the air inside the broken outpost felt heavy with silence. The human sat awake, his eyes on the child who dozed fitfully under the thin blanket. Every small movement she made told a story, her body twitching as if chased in dreams, her hands clutching at nothing, her lips whispering names that no longer answered. It was the sleep of someone carrying a burden far too great for her young years. He leaned back, his armor scraping against the wall, his thoughts restless. There was no denying it now. Soldiers were hunting her, and she had secrets that could cost both their lives. Still, he remembered her broken words. My mother told me to find someone kind. The memory lingered like a chain around his chest, pulling him between doubt and duty. When dawn's pale light crept through the cracks, the girl stirred awake, her glowing eyes tired but alert. She sat up slowly, hugging her knees, and for a long time she said nothing. Finally, her voice broke the silence, soft as a trembling leaf. You want to know why they chase me? The human said nothing at first, but his stare was enough of an answer. The girl lowered her gaze, her hands twisting the fabric of the blanket. My mother. She was not just my mother. She was a keeper, a guardian of knowledge. She carried secrets hidden from both humans and my kind. Secrets about this war. Secrets that could end it. The human's breath tightened. War had swallowed his life, destroyed his family, and left worlds in ashes. The idea of an end was both impossible and dangerous. He leaned closer, his voice sharp. And now you carry those secrets. She nodded, her lips trembling. She passed them to me before she died. Not all, but enough to make me a target. I don't fully understand them, but they know I hold the key. Her hands moved to her chest, as if guarding something invisible. They will hunt me until I am dead, and anyone with me will be hunted. Too, the human felt a weight pressing down on him. So it was true. This was more than a child's plea, more than simple kindness. He had not just taken in an orphan, he had taken in the spark of something that could change the universe, and with it he had chained himself to her fate. He stood and paced the room, his boots echoing against the metal floor. Part of him wanted to shout, to demand why fate had placed her in his path. Another part whispered that it didn't matter, because he had already chosen the moment he told her she could stay forever. The girl's eyes followed him nervously, as if she feared he might abandon her now. Her small voice cracked as she said, If you want me to leave, I will. I don't want you to die because of me. The words struck him harder than a bullet. He turned sharply, anger flashing in his tone. Leave? Into what? Into their hands, into death. Don't ever say that again. Her eyes widened, then softened with tears. You sound like her, she whispered. My mother said the same words. Before she pushed me into hiding, she told me I must live even if it meant she would not. Her shoulders shook, and for the first time since he met her, she cried openly, her voice raw and broken. I watched her fight them. I watched her fall, and I could do nothing. The human knelt before her, placing a hand on her shoulder. He had lost comrades, family, even children in this endless war. But hearing her pain stirred something deeper. You survived, he said firmly. She gave her life so you could survive. Don't let her sacrifice be wasted. Don't ever think you are nothing. The girl sniffled, her glowing eyes shimmering in the firelight. I don't want to be nothing, she whispered. I want to believe I was worth saving. The human's grip tightened slightly on her shoulder, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. Then prove it, live, survive, fight if you must, but never let them take from you what she gave her life to protect. Silence fell again, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of two broken souls who had shared their wounds. The fire crackled, and outside, the sun rose, higher, washing the ruins in pale light. Yet even as the day began, shadows lingered. The human could feel it, eyes watching from afar, footsteps too faint to hear but heavy in instinct. They were being hunted still, and soon the silence would break again. He checked his weapon, tightened the straps of his armor, and glanced. At the girl, her face was streaked with dried tears, but her gaze was stronger, her shoulders straighter. Secrets burned in the dark, and now they bound them together. The human knew this was only the beginning, and that survival would demand more than trust. It would demand sacrifice, strength, and the courage to face the storm that was already coming. And in that fragile dawn, he swore silently to himself. Whatever her secret was, whatever danger it carried, he would not let her fall, not while he still drew breath. A dangerous choice. The outpost had grown quiet again, but the silence was not peace. It was the silence before a storm. The human knew it well, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and warned of choices that could not be undone. He sat by the dying fire, sharpening his knife, while the alien child watched him with those glowing eyes that seemed to hold both fear and hope. Food was running low, his rations almost gone, and water was scarce. The power cells in the outpost were fading too, leaving them in darkness for longer hours each night. He had lived, alone with little before, but now there was another mouth to feed, another life depending on him. And it was not just any life, it was a child carrying secrets that others would kill for. Every time he looked at her, he felt the weight of the choice pressing harder. He could keep her, protect her, and fight against whoever came, or he could send her away, pretend she never came, and maybe survive longer on his own. Logic screamed for the second choice, but his heart burned with the first. The girl seemed to sense his struggle. She sat quietly, her small hands folded together, her voice soft. "You don't have to protect me. If you don't want to, I can go." The human clenched his jaw, anger flashing in his eyes. "Go where?" he snapped. "Out there, to starve or straight into their hands. Don't speak like that again." Her eyes watered, but she didn't look away. "You already risked your life by keeping me here. The soldiers will come back, and when they do, you could die because of me. Why would you do that?" The human stared at her, his knife resting in his hand. "Because," he thought, "you remind me of everything I lost. Because in your voice I hear my sister. In your tears I see my mother, and in your fear I see my own." But he did not say those words aloud. Instead he muttered, "Because no one deserves to be alone." The girl blinked at him, her lips parting slightly, and for a moment she looked as if she might cry again. But then she gave a small nod and whispered, "Thank you." That night the choice came closer. They heard it before they saw it. The faint hum of machines, the crunch of boots in the dirt, the voices carried by the wind. The soldiers had returned, and this time there were more of them. The human's heart thudded in his chest as he extinguished the fire, pulling the girl close. She clung to him, trembling, her glowing eyes wide in the dark. "They are here," she whispered. He nodded, his weapon ready, his breath steady. It would not be a question of hiding now. It would be a question of fighting. The soldiers moved through the ruins outside, their torches sweeping across the walls. He could hear them speaking in low voices, calling out, searching. The girl buried her face against his arm, whispering, "If they find us, they will take me, and you too. They will never let you live if you protect me." Her words struck him again with the cruel weight of truth. This was the dangerous choice. Before him, give her up, or fight against all odds. He thought of survival, the instinct drilled into him by years of war. He thought of the promise he had made her, the words that slipped from his lips that night. "You can stay forever." And he thought of the small, fragile hand clutching his arm now, trusting him despite her fear. The footsteps grew louder, closer, the soldiers spreading into formation. The human made his decision, his voice low and firm. Stay behind me. No matter what. The girl's voice shook. You will fight them. He gave a grim nod. If I must. The first shadow appeared in the doorway, torchlight spilling across the floor. The soldier raised his weapon, scanning the room. The human did not wait. He lunged, silent and fast, his blade flashing. The soldier fell before he could cry out, and the human dragged the body into the dark. The girl gasped softly, fear and shock in her eyes, but she did not run. She did not scream. She only clutched tighter to the blanket. The human glanced back at her and whispered harshly, Quiet no matter what you see. Outside, more footsteps, more voices. The human knew the fight had only begun, and soon the ruin would be a battlefield. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The child he had taken in was no longer just a guest, no longer just a stranger. She was his responsibility now, his burden, and perhaps his redemption. The dangerous choice had been made, not to abandon her, not to run, but to stand and face the storm that was already breaking against them, and, in the flicker of torchlight and the whisper of approaching danger, he whispered to himself, So be it. The battle for survival. The night was no longer silent. It was alive with the echo of boots and the hiss of machines. The human crouched near the broken doorway, his weapon tight in his hands, his eyes fixed on the shadows moving closer. Behind him, the alien child clung to the blanket, her glowing eyes wide with fear, her small body trembling. The first soldier had already fallen, dragged into the dark. But more were coming. Their voices were sharp, their search deliberate, and the human knew they would not leave until they found what they were hunting. His breath was steady, but inside his chest his heart pounded like war drums. Every instinct told him this was not a fight he could win, not against so many. But he had already made his choice. The door burst open and 2 soldiers stormed inside, their rifles raised. The human moved before they could fire, a shadow in the dark. His blade struck one down, while his other hand seized the second by the throat, silencing him before his cry could escape. The bodies fell heavy on the ground, and for a moment the only sound was the girl's muffled gasp. Stay low, he whispered to her, his eyes never leaving the shadows beyond the door. She nodded quickly, pressing herself against the wall, her small hands covering her mouth. But outside, more voices shouted, more torches swept the ruins, and the hunters grew impatient. Soon they would realize their scouts were missing, and then they would come in force. The human's mind raced. He had fought many battles, but this was different. He was not fighting for himself alone. He was fighting for the fragile life that had chosen to trust him, the child who carried secrets that could end wars. And strangely, for the first time, in years he did not feel like a soldier without purpose. He felt like someone with something worth protecting. The ground shook suddenly, a loud explosion ripping through the side of the outpost. Dust and fire rained from above, and the child screamed, covering her head. The human pulled her close, shielding her from the falling debris. The enemy was done searching. They were breaking the walls to flush them out. Through the smoke he saw figures advancing, rifles glowing with deadly light. He raised his weapon and fired, the sound of gunfire tearing through the night. One soldier fell, then another, but for each one, he struck down, more appeared. The outpost became a storm of fire, metal, and blood. The girl clutched his arm, her voice breaking. We can't win, they are too many. He gritted his teeth, dragging her toward the back wall. Then we don't win, we survive. He kicked, open a half-broken hatch that led into the ruins below, pulling her down with him as bullets tore through the air above. The tunnels beneath the outpost were narrow, damp, and filled with the stench of decay. The human led the way, his weapon ready, his other hand guiding the girl. Behind them, shouts echoed, the soldiers following, their boots pounding against the metal floors. Every step forward felt like a race against death. The girl stumbled, her breathing ragged, but she kept moving, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Then, without warning, a surge of light spread from her skin, faint but steady, illuminating the tunnel walls. The human turned sharply, his eyes wide. What are you doing? Her voice shook. I don't know, it happens when I'm scared. The glow brightened and the soldiers behind shouted, their voices alarmed. The human realized then, she was not just carrying secrets, she was the secret. Whatever power her mother had passed on was inside her, and it was awakening. He grabbed her hand and pulled her faster. Control it, hide it, or they'll never stop. But the glow only grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. And then, for the first time, the power lashed out. A shockwave burst from her small body, shaking the tunnel, throwing dust and rocks from the ceiling. The soldiers chasing them cried out, some falling, others retreating as the walls groaned and cracked. The girl gasped, staring at her own hands in horror. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. The human gripped her shoulders, his voice, fierce but steady. Don't be afraid of it. Fear will only make it worse. You are stronger than you think. For a moment she looked at him with trembling eyes, then nodded weakly. The human turned, leading her deeper into the tunnels even as the walls threatened to collapse. Above, the ruins of the outpost burned, the battle raging. But down below, the true fight had only begun. They were alive. But survival had come at a price. The enemy now knew exactly what they were hunting, and the girl now knew the truth, that she was not just a child running from danger. She was something more, something powerful, something that could change everything. The human glanced at her as they ran, his voice low but filled with determination. Listen to me, whatever that power is, it's why they want you. But it's also why we'll make it out alive. You're not just a burden. You're the weapon they fear most. Her eyes widened at his words, fear and hope mixing inside her. She squeezed his hand, whispering, Then promise me you won't leave me. And through the dust and smoke, with death at their heels, he gave her the only answer he could. Forever. Hope and sacrifice. The tunnels stretched endlessly beneath the ruins, damp walls dripping with water, the air heavy with the smell of rust and dust. The human led the way with his weapon in hand, his other hand guiding the trembling child who followed close behind. Every sound echoed, their footsteps, their breaths, and the faint shouts of soldiers still searching above. Though they had escaped the flames of the outpost, the danger had only deepened. The girl's faint glow lit the tunnels, her skin shimmering. Softly in the dark, it was both a blessing and a curse. It guided their steps but also threatened to reveal them. The human glanced back at her often, his eyes sharp, his mind torn between strategy and fear. She was more than a child now. She was the key, a fragile flame that could change the course of war, and he had sworn to keep her alive. Hours passed, though time felt meaningless underground. They finally paused in a wide chamber where old machinery lay broken and forgotten. The girl sat on a cracked metal beam, her small body hunched, her breaths heavy. She whispered, I slowed you down, you should have left me. The human turned to her, his voice low but firm. Stop saying that. He knelt before her, his face hardened by scars but softened by something she had awoken in him. You are not slowing me down, you are the only reason I'm still moving. Without you I'd have no reason to fight at all. Her eyes filled with tears, glowing faintly in the dark. You sound like her, like my mother. She always told me I carried more than I understood. She said I must live, even if it cost her everything. Her voice broke, and it did. She died so I could run. I don't want your life to end the same way. The human placed a rough hand on her shoulder, steady and strong. My life has been nothing but battles and silence. Maybe this is what it was leading to. Maybe protecting you is not an end, but a beginning. Before she could answer, a distant rumble echoed through the tunnels. The soldiers were not far. They had entered the underground too, following like wolves. The girl stiffened, her glowing eyes darting to the shadows. They won't stop, not until they have me. The human nodded grimly. Then we won't stop either. We keep moving, always one step ahead. They pressed deeper into the labyrinth, each corner a new risk, each tunnel a possible trap. The girl walked closer to him now, her small hand gripping his tightly. Fear still lingered in her, but with it was something new. A fragile strand of trust. She no longer looked at him as just a protector, but as family, the family she had lost. When they reached a collapsed passage, the human began clearing rocks, his muscles straining, The girl sat quietly watching him, then whispered, "Why do you fight so hard for me when you know it could cost you everything?" He paused, wiping sweat from his brow, then looked at her with tired eyes. "Because once I lost someone too, I couldn't save them, but I can save you. Maybe that's my chance to make it right." The words sank into her heart like fire. She wanted to answer, to tell him he already had saved her, but before she could, a voice rang out through the tunnels. Rough, sharp, filled with command. "They're close. Find them." The human cursed under his breath, pulling the girl behind him. Light flickered in the distance, torches and weapons, the hunters closing in. The girl's fear surged, and again her body glowed brighter, pulsing with the strange energy she could not control. The soldiers shouted as they spotted it, their boots pounding faster, the human raised, his rifle firing into the dark, each shot echoing through the stone walls. Sparks lit the tunnels as bullets struck, some hitting the enemy, others breaking stone. He shouted, "Run, go!" But the girl refused, gripping his arm, her voice desperate. "I can help, I can stop them." "No," he growled, firing again. "You don't control it yet. You'll kill yourself." Tears streamed down her glowing cheeks, but she didn't let go. "They'll kill you first." And then it happened. Her glow erupted into a storm, a shockwave bursting from her body, sending soldiers flying, their torches extinguished, their cries lost in the chaos. The tunnel shook violently, rocks crashing down, dust filling the air. The human shielded her with his body, dragging her through a narrow gap as the ceiling collapsed behind them. When the dust cleared, silence followed. The soldiers cut off by the cave-in. The girl collapsed against him. Exhausted, her glow fading. To nothing, her small voice trembled. "I didn't mean to. I couldn't stop it." The human held her tightly, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. "You saved us," he whispered. "Don't ever doubt that. Not again." For a long time they stayed there in the silence, surrounded by stone and shadows. The girl's head rested against his chest, her voice faint. "I don't want to lose you, not like I lost her." The human's arms tightened around her, his voice firm and steady. "You won't, I promised. And I don't break promises," but deep inside he knew promises were fragile things in a universe ruled by war. Hope demanded sacrifice, and he feared the day would come when he would have to give everything for her. Still, as she drifted into exhausted sleep, her small hand gripping his armor, he made the vow again in silence. Even if it cost him his life, she would live, and him. For the first time in years, hope burned inside him. Fragile but real. Hope that maybe saving one child could save more than just himself. Hope that maybe her light was strong enough to pierce even the darkest war. Forever. The tunnels gave way to open air at last, the night sky stretching above them like an endless ocean of stars. The human pulled the child up the rocky slope, his arms aching, his lungs burning, but he did not stop. Behind them, the faint sounds of collapsing stone echoed, sealing the soldiers away for now. They had survived one battle, but he knew the war was far from over. The girl stumbled beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly, her face pale but determined. Her glow had faded, but her eyes still shimmered faintly in the dark, a reminder of the power inside her. She looked up at him, her voice weak but steady. "We can't keep running forever." The human paused, scanning the horizon, the ruins of cities broken against the stars, the wasteland stretching endlessly. "No," he said at last, his voice low. "But we can keep moving until forever feels like home." They traveled through the barren land, resting only when exhaustion forced them. The human shared the last of his rations, giving her more than himself, though hunger gnawed at him like a blade. Each step was heavier, but each glance at the child gave him strength. She was no longer just someone he had promised to protect. She was family, the family he thought he would never have again. But fate did not let them walk in peace for long. By the third night, the hunters had returned, their lights moving across the wasteland, their voices carried by the wind. The girl gripped his arm, her eyes wide. "They never stop, they'll chase us until the end." The human pulled her close, his eyes sharp with fire. Then we make our stand. They found shelter in the ruins of an old tower, its walls broken but tall enough to give cover. The human positioned himself near the entrance, checking his rifle, his knife, and every last piece of ammunition. The child sat behind him, trembling but silent. Her small body, pressed into the stone, he looked back once, meeting her glowing gaze, and gave her a nod. "Stay behind me, no matter what." The night erupted with gunfire as the soldiers closed in, their weapons lighting the dark. The human fought like a storm, each shot precise, each strike fueled by something greater than survival. He was no longer fighting for himself. He was fighting for her, for the promise he made, for the hope she carried. One soldier fell, then another, but more kept coming, their shadows filling the ruins like a tide. The girl cried out, her fear rising, her body beginning to glow again. The human shouted, "Hold it back, don't let fear control you." But the power surged, spilling from her like fire, shaking the stones of the tower. The soldiers hesitated, fear flashing in their eyes, but still they pressed forward. A bullet tore across the human's side, and he staggered, blood soaking through his armor. The girl screamed, rushing to his side, "No, don't leave me." He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand, his voice fierce. "I'm not leaving, not while you're here." With the last of his strength, he raised his weapon again, cutting down the closest attackers. The girl's glow blazed brighter, but this time it was not wild, it was steady, focused. She closed her eyes, her small hands lifted, and the power burst outward, not as chaos, but as a shield. A wave of light spread across the battlefield, knocking the soldiers back, their weapons shattering in their hands. The human fell to one knee, gasping, but he watched in awe as the child stood glowing like a star. Her voice rang clear, stronger than ever before. "You will not take me, I'm not afraid anymore." The soldiers hesitated, their courage broken, and one by one they retreated into the night. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of fire and the human's labored breaths. The girl ran to him, tears streaming down her face, her glow fading. As exhaustion claimed her, she knelt beside him, clutching his hand. "You saved me, but I saved you too." The human managed a weak smile, his voice rough but steady. "That's what family does." She pressed her forehead against his chest, whispering, "Don't ever leave me, please." His arms wrapped around her, holding her close despite the pain. "You asked to stay," he whispered, "and I told you, you can stay forever." The stars above seemed brighter then, as if the universe itself had paused to honor the moment. The war was not over, and danger still hunted them. But in that ruined tower, something greater had been born. Not just survival, not just protection, but love, trust, and the fragile hope of a future. The human closed his eyes, resting his head against the cold stone, the child safe in his arms, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. Not because the battle was won, but because he was no longer alone, because forever had finally begun.